There are moments in life when heaven does not ask for your effort, it asks for your stillness. Chosen one, listen carefully because this is not noise, this is instruction. God is not trying to take your voice, He is trying to position your victory. You've been speaking too soon, explaining too much, defending yourself to people who were never assigned to understand you. And now God is saying, be silent, not because you are weak, not because you have nothing to say, but because what is coming does not need your words to survive. There is a shift happening around you. Things you cannot yet see are being rearranged. Doors are aligning. Hearts are being turned. Battles are being fought in places your voice cannot reach. And if you speak too early, you interrupt what heaven is carefully putting together. Silence in this season is not punishment, it is protection. Every time you resist the urge to react, every time you choose peace over explanation, you are showing heaven that you trust the process more than your impulse. Because let's be honest, you've wanted to respond. You've wanted to correct them. You've wanted to set the record straight. But God is saying, if I gave you the vision, why are you asking them for validation? If I called you, why are you trying to convince people who were not invited? Chosen one, your silence is confusing your enemies. They expected a reaction. They prepared for your words. They rehearsed arguments in their mind. But your quietness, that unsettles them, because they don't realize while they are watching you, God is working on them. There is something powerful about a person who knows when to speak and when to step back and let God speak instead. You are not losing your moment. You are being aligned with the right one. Because timing is everything. A word spoken too early can delay what was meant to elevate you. A reaction given in the wrong moment can close a door that God just opened. So God is saying, be silent because I am not finished. Be silent because what I am building for you cannot be explained, only revealed. Be silent because the next move is not yours, it is mine. And when it happens, you won't need to announce it. You won't need to defend it. You won't need to explain it. It will speak for itself. The same people who doubted you will witness it. The same situations that resisted you will shift. The same doors that were closed will open without your knocking. And in that moment, your silence will make sense. So don't rush this season. Don't break your silence just to feel heard. Don't trade divine timing for temporary relief. Stay still. Stay grounded. Stay aligned. Because something big is not just coming. It is already in motion. And heaven is saying, be silent now and watch what I do next. There are moments in a chosen one's life when God does not add more instruction, more signs, or more clarity. Instead, He reduces everything down to one command that feels almost too simple, almost too uncomfortable to obey: silence. Not the silence of ignorance, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of divine instruction. A silence that carries weight, meaning, and protection. A silence that feels like pressure on the soul because everything within you wants to respond, explain, defend, and prove. Yet heaven interrupts that urge with something higher than expression: alignment. This is the moment where God steps into the noise of your life and draws a line between what you feel and what He is forming. Because what you feel will always push you to react quickly, but what He is forming requires restraint. You have been conditioned by experience to believe that silence means weakness, that not responding means losing, that not defending yourself means being misunderstood forever. But in the economy of heaven, silence is not absence of power. It is the discipline of someone who understands that not every battle requires their voice, and not every accusation deserves their energy. There is a deeper work happening when God commands silence. It is not just about stopping speech, it is about stopping leakage. Because every time you speak out of season, you release energy that was meant to be preserved for your next level. Every time you try to explain yourself to those who were never assigned to understand you, you drain strength that was meant to carry you into what is coming. And God, in His wisdom, sees the full picture. He sees where you are going, not just where you are standing. So when He says be silent now, it is not restriction, it is preservation. In this season, your silence becomes a shield. It protects you from misunderstandings that would have escalated into unnecessary warfare. It protects you from conversations that would have pulled you backwards into emotional cycles you already outgrew. It protects you from revealing plans too early to people who would have resisted them before they even had a chance to grow roots. And most importantly, it protects the timing of what God is building in your life. You may feel the pressure to respond because silence feels like surrender, but heaven is teaching you a different language. The language of restraint, the language of discernment, the language of those who are no longer ruled by emotional urgency. Because not everything that provokes you deserves a response. Not every door that opens requires your immediate entry. Not every voice that speaks against you deserves your attention. Some things are designed to test whether you will stay aligned with instruction or drift back into reaction. And reaction is often where destiny gets delayed. God is not just quieting your mouth, He is refining your timing. Because timing is the difference between what is delayed and what is manifested. Many chosen ones lose access to what God intended simply because they spoke too early, moved too fast, or defended too soon. But in this moment, silence is not inactivity, it is strategy. It is the unseen posture of someone who trusts that God is working even when nothing looks different yet. There is also something happening in the spiritual atmosphere around you that your natural awareness cannot fully detect. Movements are aligning behind closed doors. Connections are being adjusted. Obstacles are being repositioned. And if you keep speaking out of urgency, you risk stepping into what is still being prepared. God's silence over your voice is often His loudest confirmation that He is actively handling what you cannot control. You may not realize it yet, but your silence is confusing what was assigned to oppose you, because they expected reaction, they expected engagement, they expected emotional participation. But what they are encountering instead is stillness, and stillness is disarming. It removes the fuel from unnecessary battles. It leaves opposition with nothing to grab onto. It forces what was meant to provoke you into exposure without engagement. This is why God is teaching you restraint not as suppression, but as elevation. Because there is a level where your voice becomes less about defending yourself and more about declaring what He has already established. But you cannot reach that level while still being controlled by the need to respond to everything. There is a refining happening in your inner world where God is separating impulse from instruction. Impulse says, respond now. Instruction says, wait. Impulse says, explain yourself. Instruction says, remain steady. Impulse says, fight back. Instruction says, stand still. And in this tension, maturity is formed. You are not being ignored. You are being trained. Trained to discern when silence carries more authority than speech. Trained to understand that not every moment is meant for visibility. Trained to realize that some victories are only secured in stillness, where no emotional interference can distort the process. Because God is not only concerned with what you achieve, but how you carry what you achieve. And if you carry it with impatience, you will lose the weight of it before you ever fully receive it. But if you carry it with silence, with discipline, with trust, you begin to walk in a stability that cannot be shaken by external noise. So when God says be silent now, He is not removing your identity. He is refining your expression. He is teaching you that there is a version of you that does not need to explain itself to exist, does not need validation to move forward, does not need approval to remain grounded. And in this quiet place, something unfamiliar begins to grow within you, a deeper awareness that God is closer in the silence than He ever was in the noise. Because in silence, distractions fade. In silence, clarity sharpens. In silence, dependency shifts from human validation to divine instruction. And you begin to realize that what felt like delay was actually alignment forming in hidden places. And what felt like restriction was actually protection guiding you away from premature exposure. And what felt like silence was actually preparation shaping you for something you are not yet able to fully articulate, because when God begins to silence a chosen one, it is because He is preparing them to what you cannot yet see does not mean it is not happening. One of the deepest tests for a chosen one is learning to trust movement without visibility, to believe in progress without proof, and to remain steady when everything around you looks unchanged. This is where hidden movements begin, not the kind of movement that announces itself, not the kind that comes with confirmation or applause, but the kind that happens beneath the surface of your life where human perception cannot reach. There are seasons where God deliberately hides His activity from your natural awareness, because if you saw too much too soon, you would misinterpret the process. You would call delay what is actually divine alignment. You would call silence what is actually construction. You would call emptiness what is actually preparation. And so God works in concealment, not because nothing is happening, but because too much visibility would disrupt your posture. In this hidden place, things are being arranged around your life that do not yet have physical evidence. Connections are being rerouted. Paths are being cleared. Obstacles are being neutralized in ways you cannot trace back. What looks like delay is often unseen restructuring. What feels like rejection is often redirection happening in a space you are not yet permitted to access mentally or emotionally. This is where trust becomes deeper than understanding. Because understanding demands proof, but trust moves without it. And God is shaping a version of you that no longer needs constant confirmation to remain faithful to the process. He is building a resilience within you that does not collapse just because visibility is absent. Because visibility is not the source of movement, it is only the revelation of what has already been arranged. You may feel like nothing is changing, but silence is not stagnation. Silence is often the most active stage of transformation. It is where roots are growing deeper before anything is seen above the surface. And roots do not grow where there is constant disturbance. They grow where there is stillness, where the environment allows unseen development to strengthen what will eventually support visible expansion. God hides movement from you not to confuse you, but to mature your perception. Because if every step of your journey was visible, your focus would shift from obedience to anticipation. You would start chasing outcomes instead of walking with instruction. And the chosen one's path is not built on chasing outcomes, it is built on following direction even when outcomes are not guaranteed in sight. There are decisions being made around your life that you did not initiate, yet they are affecting your direction. Some delays are not delays at all, but divine pauses placed strategically to synchronize timing. Some closures are not losses, but protections from alignment that would have destabilized your next season. And while you may feel excluded from what is happening, you are actually being guarded within it. The unseen realm of your life is more active than the visible one. There are negotiations happening in the background of your destiny that you are not meant to interfere with through premature action. There are adjustments being made to people, places, and opportunities that will eventually intersect with your path at the exact moment they are meant to. But if you rush, if you force visibility, you risk stepping into a version of timing that is not yet synchronized with what is being prepared. Hidden movements also test your emotional discipline. Because when you cannot see progress, you are tempted to create it through anxiety, through overthinking, through forcing situations to give you reassurance. But God is teaching you that reassurance does not always come in physical evidence. Sometimes reassurance comes in restraint, in the ability to remain calm without explanation, in the ability to continue without immediate reward. This is also where faith is refined into something more stable than emotion. Because emotional faith reacts to what it sees, but refined faith remains steady even when nothing is visible. And God is not building a reactive version of you, He is building a grounded one. A version that does not collapse under uncertainty, that does not panic in hidden seasons, that does not interpret silence as abandonment. In this hidden movement, God is also protecting you from premature exposure. There are things that, if revealed too early, would attract resistance before they are fully formed. There are doors that, if opened too soon, would collapse under unprepared weight. And so God keeps things hidden not to deny you access, but to ensure sustainability when access finally arrives. Even the people around you are being processed in ways you cannot detect. Some are being removed quietly, not through dramatic endings, but through gradual distancing that you may not fully understand until later. Others are being prepared to re-enter your life with a different role, a different capacity, a different alignment that you cannot yet recognize because you are still in the middle of unfolding. What feels like confusion is often coordination beyond your comprehension. And what feels like absence is often divine arrangement happening in spaces you cannot enter. Because God does not always show you the blueprint while He is building it. Sometimes He only shows you enough to keep you moving, not enough to control the outcome. There is also a spiritual recalibration happening within you during this hidden movement. Your desires are being refined, your reactions are being reshaped, your expectations are being realigned. Things you once chased will no longer hold the same weight. Things you once feared will lose their grip. And this internal restructuring is necessary because the next level requires a different internal architecture. And so while you wait in what appears to be stillness, you are actually being prepared for acceleration. But acceleration without alignment would destroy what God is building. So hidden movement ensures that when things finally become visible, you are ready to sustain them, not just receive them. This is why silence surrounds your current season, because silence is often the covering over hidden construction. And those who try to interpret silence too early often mislabel what God is still forming. But what is being formed in hidden places will eventually speak louder than anything you could have. Explained prematurely, there is a place in your journey where God does not ask you to understand Him. He asks you to endure Him, not in a way that feels distant or disconnected, but in a way that demands trust when nothing around you confirms it. This is the discipline of stillness, not passive waiting, not emotional withdrawal, but an active surrender where you choose not to move ahead of what God has not yet revealed. It is one of the hardest forms of obedience because it goes against everything your mind has been trained to do when uncertainty rises. Stillness is not comfortable for the human spirit. It creates tension between what you desire to see and what God has chosen to hide for now. You want clarity, but you are given silence. You want answers, but you are given timing. You want direction, but you are given a pause that forces you to stay where you are until something within you becomes stronger than impatience. And this is where trust is no longer theoretical, it becomes practical, tested in real time through your restraint. In this season, God is not measuring your speed, He is measuring your stability. Because speed without alignment leads to collapse, and movement without foundation leads to confusion. So He slows you down internally, even if life around you feels uncertain or delayed. And that slowing is not punishment, it is protection from becoming someone who moves without discernment. You begin to realize that waiting without evidence is a form of spiritual maturity, because anyone can believe when results are visible, but it takes a different level of faith to remain steady when nothing confirms your belief yet. And God is shaping that depth within you, not because He enjoys silence, but because silence reveals what noise often hides. Noise distracts you from your internal posture. Silence exposes it. In stillness, you are forced to confront the parts of yourself that rely too heavily on immediate outcomes. The part that wants reassurance from timing. The part that interprets delay as rejection. The part that assumes absence means abandonment. And God gently begins to strip those assumptions away, not through sudden answers, but through sustained quiet that teaches you how to exist without constant validation from external circumstances. This is where emotional dependence is broken, because stillness removes the illusion of control. You cannot manipulate outcomes in silence. You cannot rush divine timing. You cannot force clarity where God has chosen concealment. And in that limitation, something unexpected begins to form resilience. Not the kind that is loud or reactive, but the kind that is deeply anchored in trust, even when understanding is absent. Stillness also becomes the place where your perception shifts. You start to notice that not everything requires your intervention. Not every delay is a problem to fix. Not every closed door is an emergency. Some things are simply in a process that does not involve your interference yet, and learning to recognize that is part of the discipline God is building in you, because a restless spirit often misinterprets divine order as disorder. There are layers in your life that God is stabilizing during this stillness that you cannot access through action. Character is being refined in the background. Emotional reactions are being softened. Internal pressure is being recalibrated. And these changes are not visible, but they are essential for what comes next. Because without internal stability, external blessings become overwhelming instead of sustaining. Stillness also tests your ability to trust God without immediate feedback. This is where many people struggle, because they are used to confirmation through movement. But God is teaching you a different language, the language of unseen assurance, a quiet knowing that does not rely on external validation, a deep internal conviction that remains even when circumstances do not yet align. And in this process, you begin to detach from the need to constantly interpret everything. You stop trying to decode every delay, every silence, every pause as if you are meant to fully understand it in real time. Instead, you learn to allow things to unfold without forcing meaning prematurely. This is not ignorance, it is spiritual maturity that recognizes God's timeline is not always immediately readable. Stillness also removes unnecessary noise from your decision-making process. When you are not reacting constantly, you begin to hear differently. Your discernment sharpens, your awareness deepens. You notice patterns you previously ignored because urgency clouded your perception. And in that clarity, you start to realize that some of your past movements were driven more by pressure than by instruction. God uses stillness to reset your internal rhythm, because a life driven by urgency eventually becomes unstable, but a life grounded in stillness develops strength that does not easily shift under pressure. You become less reactive, more observant, less impulsive, more intentional. And this transformation happens not through instruction alone, but through enforced pauses that teach your spirit how to slow down. There is also a hidden protection in this stillness that you may not recognize immediately. Because while you feel like you are not moving, you are also being shielded from environments that are not yet aligned with your readiness. There are spaces you would have entered prematurely if not for this pause. Conversations you would have had too early. Decisions you would have made without full clarity. And stillness prevents that premature exposure. In this quiet place, God is also detaching your identity from urgency. You begin to realize that you are not defined by how fast things happen in your life. You are not measured by immediate outcomes. You are not validated by constant progress. Instead, your identity is being rooted in something deeper than visible movement. A steady assurance that your life is not abandoned simply because it is not accelerating. And while stillness feels like inactivity, it is actually a form of preparation that cannot be rushed. It is the stretching of your capacity to handle what you are asking for. It is the expansion of your emotional endurance. It is the quiet formation of strength that will hold you steady when things finally begin to move quickly again. In this place, God is teaching you how to remain when everything in you wants to rush forward, how to stay grounded when uncertainty tries to push you into panic, how to trust without needing constant explanation. And this discipline becomes the foundation for everything that follows, because without it, acceleration would overwhelm you instead of elevating you. There is a mystery in timing that most people never fully learn to respect, and yet it governs almost everything about destiny. You can be gifted, prepared, and even called, but if your timing is misaligned, what was meant to elevate you can feel like it is collapsing around you. This is why divine timing is not just about when things happen, but about who you are when they happen. And in this season, God begins to reveal a truth that can feel uncomfortable at first. Young people do not accelerate His plan. It only distorts your experience of it. There are moments when you feel like you are ready, when your emotions tell you that the waiting has gone on long enough, when your mind convinces you that you have done all you can do. But readiness in your perception is not the same as readiness in God's design. Because you measure readiness by desire, but God measures it by alignment. And alignment includes timing, environment, maturity, and unseen preparation that you are not always aware of. This is where the tension begins. You feel the urge to move, to speak, to act, to push things forward. But something within your spirit resists that urgency. It is subtle at first, like a quiet hesitation you cannot fully explain. And that hesitation is often divine restraint, not confusion. It is God protecting you from stepping into something before it is fully formed around you. Divine timing is not random delay. It is precision. It is the orchestration of events, people, and circumstances so perfectly aligned that when something finally manifests, it does not just appear, it lands. And when it lands, it sustains. Because what is born in divine timing carries stability within it. What is forced outside of timing carries instability, even if it looks successful at first. Many chosen ones struggle here because they interpret waiting as stagnation. But waiting in divine timing is not empty space. It is active alignment behind the scenes. Things are shifting in ways you cannot measure yet. Conditions are being prepared. Conversations are being positioned. Opportunities are being adjusted so that when they meet you correctly. There are doors that do not open simply because you knock. There are doors that only open when everything around them is ready to receive what you carry. And if you arrive before that readiness is complete, even open doors can feel closed, not because they are shut, but because the timing is off. And timing determines reception. God often delays visibility not because He is withholding, but because He is synchronizing. And synchronization is invisible until it is complete. You may feel like nothing is happening, but behind that silence, coordination is taking place at levels you cannot access through effort. Because effort does not control timing, it only prepares you for it. One of the hardest lessons in divine timing is learning that your voice cannot speed up what God has scheduled. You can declare, you can plan, you can desire intensely, but timing remains untouched by emotional urgency. And that is not limitation, it is protection. Because if timing were influenced by impulse, many things would arrive in your life unprepared for your capacity, and you would be forced to carry what you are not yet strengthened to hold. There is also a hidden wisdom in delay that only becomes clear later. What you thought was lost time was actually formation time. What you thought was rejection was often redirection away from premature alignment. What you thought was denial was often protection from entering something before your character was ready to sustain it. Divine timing also reshapes how you see yourself. Because when things do not happen when you expect, you are forced to confront whether your identity is tied to outcomes or anchored in trust. And God uses this space to detach you from the illusion that your worth is measured by how quickly things manifest in your life. There is a recalibration happening in your inner world during this waiting that is not visible but deeply significant. Your emotional responses are being slowed down. Your reactions are being refined. Your expectations are being adjusted so that when timing aligns, you do not self-sabotage what you prayed for through impatience or fear. You may notice that what once triggered anxiety in you now feels quieter. That is not coincidence. That is conditioning. God is teaching your system how to remain stable in uncertainty so that when acceleration comes, you are not overwhelmed by sudden change. Because delayed timing is often preparation for increased speed later. There are also connections in your life that are being timed with precision. Some people are not meant to meet you yet because the version of you they would meet is not the version God is still shaping. Some opportunities are not meant to reach you yet because the environment around you is not yet stable enough to support them. Timing ensures that when everything converges, it does so without breaking you. And while you wait, something deeper is happening in your perception. You begin to realize that not everything that feels urgent is actually important. Urgency is emotional. Timing is spiritual. And the two are not always aligned. What feels like pressure to move may actually be pressure to remain still until clarity matures within you. God uses timing to teach you patience that is not passive, but active trust. A patience that continues to prepare even while waiting. A patience that remains engaged without forcing outcomes. A patience that understands that delay is not denial, but design unfolding at its correct pace. There is also a refinement happening in your expectations, because when things take longer than expected, your attachment to specific outcomes begins to loosen. And in that loosening, you become more flexible, more receptive, less rigid in how you believe things must happen. This flexibility is essential for what is coming, because divine timing rarely follows human prediction. And when timing finally aligns, it often feels sudden to the human mind, even though it was long in preparation. What looks like overnight change is usually the result of long unseen coordination. That is why divine timing often surprises those who were not paying attention in the silence, but it confirms everything for those who learn to trust the process without visible evidence. There comes a point in every chosen one's journey where silence is no longer just instruction, stillness is no longer just discipline, timing is no longer just patience, but everything converges into a moment of revelation that cannot be ignored. This is where the great reveal begins, not as a sudden accident, but as the culmination of everything that was hidden, delayed, refined, and protected. It is the moment where what God has been doing in secret begins to speak in public form. And what once required faith to believe now requires only presence to witness. The great reveal is never random. It is the exact point where preparation meets permission. Everything that was processed in silence now becomes visible in structure. Everything that was shaped in stillness now becomes evident in movement. Everything that was aligned in timing now becomes undeniable in manifestation. And what makes it powerful is not just that something appears, but that everything appears in order, without confusion, without fragmentation, without instability. Before the reveal, there is often misunderstanding. People may have misread your silence as lack of progress. They may have misinterpreted your stillness as stagnation. They may have assumed your waiting meant absence of direction. But what they could not see was that invisibility was never emptiness. It was construction. And construction does not always announce itself while it is happening. It only reveals itself when it is ready to stand. In this stage, God does not just show you outcomes, He reveals the process in hindsight. You begin to understand why certain doors did not open, why certain relationships ended, why certain delays protected you from outcomes you were not prepared to carry. And what once felt like confusion becomes clarity. What once felt like delay becomes design. What once felt like silence becomes strategy. The great reveal also brings alignment into visibility. People, places, and opportunities that were being prepared in the background now begin to intersect with your life in ways that feel intentional rather than random. Connections that were once distant begin to make sense in proximity. Paths that once felt disconnected begin to converge with clarity. And you realize that nothing was truly isolated, everything was being coordinated. But the reveal is not only external, it is also internal. Because by the time things begin to manifest outwardly, something within you has already changed. You are no longer the same person who struggled with impatience. You are no longer the same person who needed constant confirmation. You are no longer the same person who misinterpreted silence as absence. The process has already transformed you before the outcome arrives. This is why the reveal does not overwhelm you in the same way it would have earlier. Because capacity has been built quietly in the background. Emotional stability has been strengthened. Discernment has been refined. Reactions have been disciplined. So when things begin to unfold, you are not shaken by them, you are prepared to hold them. There is also a deeper awareness that comes with this stage. You begin to recognize that God was never absent, even in the moments that felt uncertain. You see his hand not only in what arrived, but in what was prevented. You see his wisdom not only in open doors, but in closed ones. And the narrative of your journey shifts from confusion to coherence. The great reveal often exposes not just blessings, but patterns. You begin to see how protection operated in disguise, how redirection was actually guidance, how silence was actually communication. And this understanding changes how you interpret everything that comes next. You stop reacting to surface-level appearances and start discerning deeper structure. There is also a quiet humility that comes with revelation. Because when you see how much was orchestrated without your awareness, you realize how little control you actually needed to maintain. And that realization softens the need to force outcomes in the future. It replaces urgency with trust. It replaces anxiety with awareness. It replaces control with surrender that is now grounded in experience rather than theory. In the great reveal, what once felt delayed begins to feel perfectly timed. What once felt hidden begins to feel intentionally preserved, and what once felt uncertain begins to feel precisely guided. This shift in perception is not just emotional, it is transformational. Because perception determines how you carry what is given to you. There is also recognition that arrives with this stage. Not necessarily from everyone, but from those who were meant to see it. People begin to witness what was formed in silence, not because you announced it, but because it became undeniable. And this is where the power of restraint becomes visible. Because what was not rushed into exposure now carries weight in manifestation. But even in the reveal, there is still grounding. Because you understand that what is being shown is not the end of the journey, but the confirmation of alignment within it. You do not become distracted by visibility, because you recognize the process that brought it here. And that recognition keeps you steady, even in expansion. The great reveal is not just about what God shows you. It is about what God shows through you. It is the evidence that silence was not absence, stillness was not stagnation, timing was not delay, and hidden movement was not inactivity. It is the moment where everything that was once invisible becomes understandable without explanation, where the narrative of your life begins to speak for itself without needing defense or justification.